A near 50-mile chase ends a 2-week run for 27-year-old John Michael Maynard. Authorities believe 48-year-old Toby Young helped him escape.
Welcome to Greatest Prison Escapes. I'm your host, Billy Hayes. I know a little about escaping from prison. On October 2nd, 1975, I escaped from a Turkish prison 5 years into a life sentence. The story of my escape was the subject of my book and the Oscar-winning film, Midnight Express. Whatever got us there, everyone in prison is thinking of one thing: getting out. This series is about those who make the ultimate decision, seeking freedom at any cost. Dog, man's best friend. They started as wolves. Now, they're our pets. They sleep in our beds, they watch over our children, they help us hunt. Some women even carry them in their purses. And they've helped us break a lover out of prison.
My name is Toby Dorr, and an opportunity presented itself that Lansing Correctional Facility was looking for someone to bring dogs into the prison and put a dog program there.
So you want to turn my prison into some sort of humane society?
A lot of dogs in rescue centers never get adopted because they never get socialized. They're afraid of humans.
Perhaps I was a bit naive, but I just waltzed into the prison and walked around. I had dogs in maximum custody, which we were the only prison dog program in the country that ever put dogs in maximum custody.
Toby's weakness, her glaring vulnerability, that she believed everyone was redeemable.
Mr. McCoon, I'm not asking you to give the dogs to a bunch of guys on death row, but inmates with good behavior must be capable of earning something, right?
Toby, I like you, so don't make me regret this.
Toby's Safe Harbor Prison Dog Program was greenlit by David McCune. But why would anyone embark on such a peculiar, albeit noble task? Because beyond that white picket facade of a happy life, there was an empty nester desperate for attention.
Looking back, I think it's pretty obvious that we never really were in love with each other. We just didn't argue or fight, so there was no reason to break up.
And if Toby's failed marriage wasn't enough, later that year, Toby was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. In 2004, Toby Young beat thyroid cancer, earning a second chance at life.
I was looking for something to make a difference in the world after a cancer diagnosis. And I realized that really my heart lied with rescuing dogs. And so I jumped on the chance. And, I knew I would make a difference in the lives of these dogs, but I was never prepared for the difference I made in the lives of the inmates. When you bring these dogs into the prison, and the dogs actually lived with the inmates, slept in their beds with them, it just overnight changed the whole atmosphere of the prison.
The program was a smashing success. Within months, hundreds of dogs were adopted. Who would have thought that rapists and murderers would be able to socialize broken animals? While the Safe Harbor Prison Dog Program had given Toby Young a renewed purpose in life, her life at home and romantic life were non-existent. And that was about to change.
Hi, I'm John. You need me in your dog program.
His brashness, his swagger, his charisma, it immediately captivated Toby.
I'm Toby.
Guessing this one hasn't gotten too much attention.
Yeah, he's been in the shelter for almost 2 years now, since his owner died.
What's his name?
Chester.
Chester. Toby, you're probably one of the best dog handlers you've ever met.
John Manard, he was a tall kid with an uncommon confidence. He was also serving a life sentence for murder, one he vehemently denied committing. John said he was only driving and said he didn't know his friend had a gun on him. And his friend claimed the gun went off by accident.
I met John Maynard about 7 weeks after I started the prison dog program, and he became one of my dog handlers. And he was a pretty prominent dog handler because most of the dog handlers would just do whatever I told them. You know, I could tell them, I want you to flip over backwards while you're trying to walk your dog, and they would try. But John Manard was different.
So, John, what are you in here for?
Driving my friend and I around, and he was mad at someone. We saw him. He pulled out a gun and shot him. I didn't even know he had a gun on him. I know I didn't shoot him. In Kansas, even being there is considered a murder.
He was sharing things about himself with me, and I was sharing things about myself with him because, you know, I felt like he was my bodyguard almost. And so that really kind of changed our the dynamic of our relationship.
Hey, Toby. I'm gonna go use the bathroom. You good for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead, I'll be fine.
Well, there were only 2 incidents that I felt scared.
Hi, Toby.
Hi, Wayne. How you doing?
Doing good. I was wondering when I could start fostering another dog.
I'll have to find out. Is your girlfriend still kind of pick up the other dog you fostered? It's still in the shelter.
Well, I told you she was, didn't I?
Yeah.
And why are you grilling me on it? I told you she was.
Right. Yeah, I just...
Just what?
No,
Calling me a liar?
no, it's just...
Then what? What is it?
I was sure he was going to hit me, and the 2 dog handlers I was with just kind of backed away and faded into the group.
If I tell you she's gonna get the dog, she'll get the dog. Don't say another word to her.
Then John Manard came strolling across the yard, and I knew, you know, he was there to save me.
Toby, you all right?
Yeah. He was just having a bad day, right?
The prospect of having to run the Safe Harbor prison dog program from exclusively outside the prison walls crushed her. But to her surprise, Warden David McCune would offer her a solution.
We had 4 people watching her and nobody did a damn thing. Speak.
I can watch her. Or let those other knuckleheads watch her. They don't have dogs. I love the program. I love my dog. You could let someone who cares about the program watch her.
The Safe Harbor prison dog program would continue. John Manard was assigned to serve as Toby's personal bodyguard. This would prove to be a huge mistake.
John and I started having more in-depth conversations, and we realized that we were attracted to each other.
Toby, you ever think of me when you go home?
Every night.
If I could get out of here, do you think you could ever be with me?
Yes, I do.
I can't have any physical contact here, ever. Do you understand? If I could figure a way to get out of here, would you help me?
Yes.
So he started thinking about ways he could escape. And he actually asked me, you know, I could put myself in a box and ship me out in a UPS shipment. And I said, well, that's a stupid idea. And then he'd come to me and say, well, I have this other idea. And he'd tell me some idea. And I'd say, well, that's kind of stupider than the first idea. And one day he came to me and he said, I could hide in your van when you come in to do a dog adoption. And I said, that idea might work.
Find a way to get out. Will you still help me like you said?
Yes.
Toby had been allowed to store a bunch of her spare dog handling equipment in an overflow room, but the prison recently told Toby that she needed to clear her things out.
What can I do for you?
I need to move some of my things out of the storage unit, and I was gonna do it on Sunday.
Yeah, sure, whatever you want.
Toby withdrew $40,000 from her 401k. She immediately turned around and used the cash to buy a large truck. In final preparation for the escape plan, Toby purchased a week's worth of non-perishables and stored them in the truck, then stashed the truck at a storage unit.
This, to me, kind of felt like this fantasy game we were playing, and I never really took it seriously until the day came. And we had this plan worked out, and I drove into the prison to pick up some dogs for adoption, and I knew that he was going to be inside of a box inside of a dog crate on that day.
Toby, what's left to move?
There's a cage I use for spare equipment and a high-anxiety dog crate.
High-anxiety crate?
Yeah, it's for very excitable dogs.
And I was just sure any minute they were going to figure something out because I was so nervous, I could hardly stay still.
One, two, three. Get it up there.
I was waiting for this siren to go off. So anytime there's an escape or some kind of an emergency at the prison, they blow this steam whistle that the whole community can hear. And I waited for that siren to go off. And they closed gate 3, and then they opened gate 2, and I drove through gate 2, and I got to gate 1, and I thought, now this is when the siren's gonna go off. You know, we're sitting here at this gate, this is the last gate, and they've gotta know something's going on. They gotta wonder, you know, what's in that dog crate? Maybe we should check that. But nobody ever did. And they opened gate 1, and it just opened so slowly, it just felt like it was barely moving. And I drove through gate 1, they closed it behind me.
John, are you in there?
The escape was smoother than either of them expected. John was elated to be free. Toby, she was under the impression she was starting her new life. Toby had no idea what she had just done. Toby and John switched vehicles an hour out of Lansing, managing to slip out of town without incident. Now that they had made the switch, the plan was to take the scenic route down to the lakeside cabin in Tennessee that Toby rented under a fake name.
I was crazy in love with him and just desperate. You know, and being in prison like that and walking around and having these feelings and knowing you can't touch them, you can't let on that there's anything going on. It was just like this sizzle that happened anytime the two of us were together. And by the time that we finally did the escape, I had convinced myself that I would do anything just to be able to be with him.
Toby, I need to know where to turn.
I know, I'm looking.
We could have missed the turn by now.
I'm sorry, I'm so exhausted. I can't remember where I circled
This
this.
isn't a game. We need to get off the road and get to the cabin.
I can't remember. So maybe we should, stop somewhere and ask directions.
Pull over! Pull over! What are you, an idiot? Just dump your ass on the side of the road and be done with you.
Are you kidding me right now?
Toby was positive that John was wrongly convicted, that he was a second victim in the drive-by shooting. She had never seen this side of him before.
He kind of transitioned between this giddy kid who was living in a new world and delighted to be there, and this paranoid person who was always looking over his shoulder.
John, please don't leave me. Don't leave me here on the side of the road, please.
God. I'm sorry, Toby. Just every moment I'm not in prison, it messes with my head. I'm really on edge. I'm starved from trying to fit in that dog cage. I would never kick you out on the side of the road. I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
Really?
Of course.
Despite John's blow-up, he and Toby's first few days at the cabin were whimsical and warm-hearted.
It smells so good. I haven't had a home-cooked meal in 8 years.
Toby was thrilled to cook for a grateful man. John serenaded Toby. Even if the singing wasn't great, to Toby, it was the thought that counted.
I had not had romance in my life before, and it was just, it was kind of like pouring water on a dying plant, you know? the good parts of John were so good that they made up for the paranoid parts of John.
The next day, they drove 3 hours to Chattanooga so John could see a movie. It was another bad idea Toby went along with, fearing how John would react to not getting his way.
We went to Chattanooga on Friday, February 24th, to go to an IMAX movie. And that day was when the FBI fugitive team and the U.S. Marshals went to our cabin that we had rented, but we weren't there.
In a remote resort near the Kentucky border, this is where Young allegedly asked an Independence, Missouri car dealer to send the title to her new used truck.
And their headquarters was in Chattanooga, which is where we went to the movie. And they were sitting in the parking lot at a shopping center, figuring out what was going to be their plan for the next day. And we walked right in front of them in that parking lot and had no idea that they were there. And we were wearing wigs, which naively we thought was enough to disguise us, but they figured it out right off.
It was always going to be a matter of time before Toby and John were spotted. But taking a stroll around Chattanooga Mall was a silly, unforced error, and it would cost them. John had realized that Toby was breaking. Knowing he didn't have a way to survive without Toby's money, John reverted to his best behavior. But the borrowed time they had been living on was coming to an end.
Let's use the new GPS and do something fun tomorrow. We can do whatever you want all day.
About an hour down the interstate, they had used that time to set up this trap. I look out the window because there's this bright light up ahead. And I had turned to watch and I saw these cars backed up and I said, "Oh, John, there must be an accident up ahead and they're closing the highway because somebody's hurt. So, you need to be careful." And he said, "Oh, Toby, there's no accident. This is all for us." John said, "Well, what do you want to do, Toby? Because you're part of this too." And I said, "Well, if they turn on their lights and tell you to pull over, you've got to pull over because that's the law." And he said, "Okay, if that's what you want, that's what we'll do." And just then, this police car sped around us and cut in front of us and slammed on their brakes because they wanted us to rear end them. And that made John mad. And he said, "These MFers are trying to kill us. I'm not stopping," and he just took off.
John, pull over!
And when we got to a place where we couldn't go forward anymore, he turned into the median and drove through those woods and knocked over shrubs and bushes and came out on the other side and was going in the other direction. And we swerved across the highway right in front of a semi-truck. I don't know how the semi-truck missed us, but I knew we were going to hit a tree, and I knew exactly which tree we were going to hit. It was almost like there was this magnet pulling us to this tree. And I remember praying and saying, "God, please let me die when we hit this tree, because whatever's coming next, I can't do it. So just take me now."
U.S. Marshals received a tip from the Fugitive Task Force and spotted Maynard and Young near Shallowford Road in Chattanooga. Maynard then lost control of the truck.
And the minute we hit the tree, all this sound came back and I could hear glass busting, I could hear steam rising off the engine, and I could hear officers screaming and yelling and all the sirens.
Get out of the car, get on the ground, and keep your hands where I can see them.
I had the wind knocked out of me, I realized, and I think I might have had a little bit of a concussion because I kind of blacked out for a moment. And I was just kind of stunned, and I was trying to figure out what's going to happen. And I remember this officer ran up to the passenger window. He had this little black machine gun, and he stuck that in the window, and he stuck it up to my head, and he said, "Get out of the vehicle." And I remember saying, "I can't." He said, "Well, I'll get you out of there." And he reached in and unhooked the seatbelt, and he grabbed me by my shoulder and my hair and threw me on the ground. And I remember thinking, who do they think I am? I'm not going to do anything. But, of course, I already had done something.
At a glance, you could be forgiven for thinking the escape of Toby Young and John Manard was a cute story you would have seen in a cartoon. With a closer look, this was never a cute story. Toby Young almost died, and the aftermath was as wide as it was deep. The state of Kansas and the Lansing Correctional Facility were embarrassed. Toby was slapped with aiding and abetting an aggravated escape.
The prosecutor said he can't give you probation because the media would crucify him if he did.
She was given 2 years and 3 months in prison. As for John, he had another 10 years slapped onto his life sentence. Prison is where Toby began to wake up from the dream she had been in since her fight with cancer.
And it was kind of hard to go to that women's state prison because just a few months before, that state prison had a prison dog program as well. And some of the unit team leaders and my contact from the warden's office, all of us went on a field trip to the women's prison to see how their prison dog program was run. And now I'm coming into this very same prison as an inmate, and it was so humiliating and so embarrassing.
While in prison, Toby's youngest son had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Because of his wishes, Toby didn't see him in the hospital once she got out. But when his condition worsened, she showed up.
And so he asked me to please give him space so he could deal with his cancer. And so I did. A few days after his second bone marrow transplant, Chris told me, you know, Toby, I think you need to go to the hospital because, you know, things don't look very good and you're running out of time. And so I did go up there to see him. And, I told him, I said, Greg, I can't explain to you why I did what I did because I haven't figured it out yet myself. But I want you to know that I still love you and I have always loved you. That has never changed. And he said, I know, Mom. I know you love me. And I said, can I give you a hug? And he said, no, I need to focus on this cancer. So, Greg was in a coma and he was in intensive care and his organs were shutting down and it was the end. And Chris said to me, Toby, you need to be there. You're his mother. And so Chris drove my mom and I to the hospital. I took Greg's hand and I leaned down and whispered in his ear and I told him I was there and that he had fought long enough and hard enough and it was his time to go and he could just let go and be at peace. And then my mom and I left the room, and before we got to the elevator, my sister called me and said that he had passed.
Toby became a pariah in her community and even her own family. But to Toby's credit, she has risen above it. This isn't a case study in stupidity, but a case study in naivete. A case study of a person whose biggest flaw is finding the goodness in people.
I am so relieved that after the escape, the prison found a way to keep the prison dog program going for another 15 years.
Toby's gone on to become an inspirational figure. She's made workbooks to help other women in prison process their feelings and circumstances, to help them break the self-destructive cycles that put them behind bars to begin with. She even wrote a best-selling book about her experience in prison and what she learned from it.
But the biggest message I learned, and it's the one that I repeat to everyone I come across, is that none of us is our worst mistake.
When asked if she regrets breaking John out of prison, she said regrets are a waste of time, and that she wouldn't be the person she is today without her time in prison. I can personally attest that the growth one develops from overcoming time in prison comes at a high cost and a substantial amount of pain. I'm Billy Hayes. Join us next time on Greatest Prison Escapes.